Hey guys, this is the recording for October 17th in for 367, 467. Couple of things. I'm gonna briefly discuss what happened in class last time. But I'm actually gonna not do it during the recording. I'm actually gonna do that next time. Um, uh, I think we covered it. We just need to polish some things, and then we can do that super quickly. So I'm going to just drop right into HTML. So let's do that. So we talked about the server side. We didn't really talk about Tomcat application servers, but we did actually talk about Spring Boot. If you look at the creation process, if you look at when you run a Spring Boot application, you can actually see it loads a embedded version of Tomcat. It creates a servlet and then loads your application into that servlet. We don't care about that. We just use Spring Boot and it does all the things for us, which is great. But now it's time to move to the client side. So we need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript so we can learn to use the Angular framework. We actually are going to talk about HTML and CSS this week, CSS on Wednesday and HTML today. Unfortunately, I'm going to ask that you learn most of it on your own. There's some things I'm going to teach and some things I'm going to expect you to just kind of figure out on your own. HTML is not very difficult to learn. CSS is not very difficult to learn. There's a tons of tutorials available for you, as well as NetBeans, which we'll see will do some of the work for you, which is kind of nice. So we're going to play with that today. Then next week, we're going to talk about JavaScript, and then we're going to wrap up the class by going into Angular. Yay, and that will give us the full picture of a full stack web application. So let's go right into HTML. There's no real reason to screw around. Let's get into it. We're going to talk about the purpose and use of HTML tables and forms, including tags and elements. Explain the purpose of all basic elements and their implementation. We discussed getting the form to work using action and method attributes. We want to talk about the action and method attributes. And then we talk about the various methods available and the terms and purposes and use of each. So what I specifically mean, and you can guess from this, is I'm going to talk about tables and forms. I'm going to leave out most of HTML because I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We're going to go and talk about a tutorial all day long. I mean, we really are. The demo portion of today is going to be mostly going over tutorial and explaining you how to learn HTML on your own. But there's two elements that I cannot hope that you learn. There's two things that you're going to have to learn. And so I go over them quickly today. We also have, when we say methods, that last one, it's really input methods, right? We're going to go over the various types of form elements, the core ones anyway. We're also going to talk about tables for columnar information. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. So creating your first HTML tag, page, bold tag, anchor link, absolute relative file passes, URLs. That I'm going to talk about all of these things. I'm just going to do it during the demo portion of today, which is kind of funny because I'm actually going to stop and do it all the time, right? So we're going to do that today. The most important that you're going to learn here is the form elements and the HTML tables. In fact, we go right into HTML tables on the next page. So let's go and do some basic HTML. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to open any one of my Angular projects. I think I have September 28th as an Angular, not Angular. I'm drawing a blank. Spring Boot projects. This one I'm going to use later, so I have it here. But I just want to show you that you actually have a web server available to you. In the static folder, if you go ahead and create a other, and then you go to HTML form, I think, web, nope. Go to other maybe? Yeah, HTML file, boom. And then you create something called the index. By default, web browsers will, not web browsers, web servers will return by default a file named index.html when asked for the directory. And you can see you have HTML, and inside that you have a head and body. Head is meta information, things like the title. The title, remember, shows up on the web page. So we'll say this my first web page, and then you can ignore this stuff. I don't really care. The title is going to show up. I'll show you where it shows up. And then inside the body, we have some stuff, right? And so what are the things we can do? Well, we can put a typical thing we do is we take my name is Michael, and I am a Ruth, whatever, right? We have some line of text, then maybe we put a break tag, and that's going to put a new line. That's going to create a new, excuse me. It's trying to autocomplete, so I was just trying to do this. It's going to actually put a new line there, and we'll talk about that as well. But let's actually see this run. We won't need it to be inside there, but it's inside the static folder. And now when I run it, some of you have tried to run my code and have failed to do so, largely because you did never created a Ruth database. It helps if you create the Ruth database. Yes, I use September 28th because I'm going to use the, I had this open because I'm going to use the, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word. I'm going to use the JDBC code in a minute to do something. So we go to localhost 8080, we go to students, and we get that, right? But what happens if we go here? We actually get this static folder, and this gives us this page. Now I'm going to change this from a break to a paragraph, just so you can see that there are different types of breaks available, different types of things available, and see that creates some space. We can actually make something bold by putting it in a bold tag. Now this is a wrap tag rather than a, here's a paragraph break, here's a break, here's a line break. This is a wrap tag. So we have to wrap it around whenever we want to wrap it around. And then we could just refresh the page. This is actually running on a web server. We don't actually need that to happen. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but we don't actually need this to happen. At any point, do we need to run HTML code inside? Eventually, when we get Angular up and running, we're going to want to put our contents inside a static folder. That's where that goes. But for your homework 3, you can just put your HTML files literally in a folder. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. Very simply without using a web browser and literally running all that code. You can actually just create a folder. I'm going to create it today and go 1017, right? And inside 1017, I'm going to create a new text document. This is going to be easier for me because I have the so when I create a text file, you might notice in my version of Windows, or in my thing, I had the settings so that shows the extension, so I can just change it. I can put the HTML stuff in here. I can open it with a code. I can open it with anything. I just won't be able to use the extension stuff here, right? Which, doesn't matter, but you should copy that out. You can do it in here if you want, but you should copy it out. All right, so let's do a couple more things. We can actually close this. We're done with that today. So we did the bold tag. We did tags like that. There are a bunch of them. For more information about tags, go to the HTML tutorial that you like. I particularly like the W3 Schools one. It's really simple. And it goes over quite a few things like headings, paragraphs, and so forth. All kinds of formatting styles and stuff like that. The other thing I like about it is it has a try yourself, and it has essentially an editor so that you can go and change something and then see the results, right? You can click run and then you'll see the results. We have a similar thing with JavaScript. We'll show you when we do JavaScript. So it's pretty cool. So that's why I kind of like it. So you can try these things out, but we're going to use a link right now to create a new page. And at first we're going to actually create a new page. So we're going to create a new HTML file and we're going to call it about, and then I'm going to create another one. Nope. Sorry. New HTML file. There we go. Then call it Mike. I don't know. I'm making things up at this point. So now we want to link to the other page. Now NetBeans is going to make this really easy for me. So I want an A, which is an anchor, a ref, which is the location of the anchor. Now you see it auto completes, or it's trying to auto complete. So it has index Mike, and if I click here, boom, I can type whatever I want. And then I close it with the A, right? And it creates a link essentially. Let me save it. And it creates a link. See, my first web page is up here. That's the title. It creates a link to itself, right? I mean, it's just going to keep going to itself, right? It makes it easy. Another thing you can do pretty easily is just copy it in there. If I drag about in here, you see it automatically creates it. And then I want to put the text that's going to make the link, right? So maybe about page. And then we'll say this one's the Mike page, right? You'll notice that it's just referencing the file name. There's no actual change since they're all in the same directory. It's really, really, really simple to do. This is what essentially most of you are going to do anyway. Oh, what happened? I closed you. Go away. Right? Okay. So this is what most of you are going to do. You can see it's Mike page. There's nothing in the Mike page yet. About page. Right? This is what most of you are going to do is you're going to keep everything in the same directory. That's what we're referring to relative file paths. These are relative file paths. They're really easy to understand. And as long as we keep everything in the same folder, we're in great shape. However, what happens when we go in another folder? We'll call this another folder, right? And then we're going to create a copy. I'm going to paste. I forget which file I just put in there. We're going to put an about page in here. And I want to link to it. Now, again, NetBeans makes this really easy. Watch what happens when I copy it now. Now it's relative, so it has another folder / about, right? So first, you have to go into another folder to get it, then go into the about. And that's how it works. Because I'm going into a directory, I can just specify the directory and then the file in the directory. That's a relative link. The other. Now, this is where things get awkward. When I'm doing this about page, I'm just going to create the links to the other pages, but it's going to be weird, and I want to explain it. / indicates that we have to come out of another folder and go back into the static folder. That's all that means, right? Get out of the directory. It's also a relative link. Yay. So what the hell is a not relative link? One where you spell out the whole thing. In terms of actually creating links in my course, do not do this frequently, right? Could I do this? / what is it? Index.html. Sorry, my nose is I'm about to sneeze. Right, I wrote out the whole URL. This is what we call an absolute URL. It includes the host name, includes protocol, and includes the whole path to the item. I'm going to explain why you don't want to do this ever. It's pretty simple, but the main reason is you see the localhost 8080 index.html. It totally works. The other one is the same link, right? So it totally works. But what happens if you change the port number of your server? What happens if I have to run it on a different port number? What happens? Then this link breaks. This link still works. So try to use relative path names however infrequently as you want. When you're in the same directory, you just specify the name of the file as you see in the index. When you're got to go into a folder, you got to go, excuse me, there it is. You put the folder name / and then the file name. If you have to get out of a folder to go up a folder, right? Then you go .. If you need to go out of 2 folders, you can go .. If you're ever confused, let NetBeans figure it out for you, right? If I drag this in here like this, it automatically does it for me, right? It automatically does the right thing. You can do this. you can keep them all in the same directory. At no point in your homework is it required to use multiple directories. But I want you to be aware of it. A lot of you may be confused at some point, but you'll see it talks about the target attribute. It talks about absolute versus relative, um, and so forth. There's a lot of things you can do, but you want to be very cautious because it's got to work for me. If I click on a link and it doesn't get me to the place, I don't want to hear, "Oh, I made the thing, you changed something." Not my problem, dude. Not my problem, right? You needed to make that work for me. So we don't want to see you do that. Use relative, and it'll always essentially work. Comments, we use comments because we're going to intersperse code. We're going to intersperse code with our HTML. Eventually, we'll have some HTML and some code and so forth. We'll go back and forth constantly. So we want to be able to write HTML comments where we need to. If we're dealing with a template engine like Angular, we're going to use HTML in the template, and then we're going to specify some things that are going to drag the information. So we may want to comment, especially helpful. So those are pretty common. Break and non-breaking space. Non-breaking space we'll talk about in a minute. But you might have noticed that when I wanted to, in the main, I think it was in the main page. When I wanted to create a space, I created the space. I want to show you something. Right? Some of you may think that this should be, 6 lines, right? It's not. It's never going to be 6 lines. Right? It just keeps going because there's no break. There's no paragraph. There's no anything. You actually have to specify a break. All that white space, the new line, character inside the file, none of that matters. It's trying to add a bunch of stuff, but none of that matters. Right? You want breaks in between these things, you actually have to do it. Now, sometimes you're going to actually want, you're going to actually want to put something that doesn't show up, like a space. Right? How do you do that? You can actually put a special character called a not trying to type it, I'm sorry, not breaking space. And it helps you fill it out. But essentially what it is a space that won't cause a break. Right? And it's useful usually in tables where you have a table element that needs to be blank, but it won't show the table element unless this is there. Like, for instance, you're trying to clean up a background. So I like to say that. There, as you saw when I typed it at, there are lots of these. I don't really care. But sometimes you're trying to use a special character that doesn't show up. You can use an @ symbol and use that special punctuation point. So that is useful. All right. I think we are ready to talk about tables. Let's go back to our presentation because HTML tables are vastly important. We're talking about databases. We're talking about tabular information. We're talking about having lots of information. So we're going to do that now. Tables are a means to present columnar information in rows and columns. Tables use the table tags. Tables are divided into rows, and each of those rows can be further divided into what we call cells or datums. Datums is actually really important because if you use TD, that's a good, easy way to remember the TD. So, whoop. Can you wait a second. Is this it? This is it. So I don't recall how many so this is where things are going to get fun. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, and we're going to call it student. Right? It's important not to call it students because then it'll have conflict with the other one. So we're going to have an index in there. So I'm just going to copy. Oops, I want to copy, not steal. So we're going to have an index in here. Right? It's going to be the default page. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some generation code. I'm just going to do it in here. Right? new folder, and students. I'm going to generate some students to create my table. But first, I'm going to wipe out the body. I don't really want any of this crap in here, so I'm going to get rid of it. My first table, right? That's what we're going to do here. So let's create some generation code. Let's create a new main class. New main. Sometimes we like to say new main index, right? I'm going to create an index. And this is why I left the code in here, because now I can go like this. Actually, I'll go like this, right? Watch this guy. Let's paste. And now watch this. I'm going to get rid of you. And all of that in between. Oops, I should have got rid of that too. So now I'm going to do my imports. I'm going to have a throws clause in case it can't connect. But I think we got the connection done. Okay. Now, what I want to do, and I want to do a couple things. I want to say H1 list of students. Okay. Let's just start there. Okay. That's what we're going to do here. And H1 automatically creates a new line. So you'll see this. But what we're going to do with our generation code is we're just going to create the table. So we want to actually create here the actual table. So we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to keep it the simplest thing you can do. But in your generation code, you're going to want to create the TRs and the TDs and stuff like that. So let's see how we put it together. It's pretty simple though. Don't make it complex. Keep it simple. Your professors have said that for a million years. It's really important to do that. We're going to find one in which we select all from students, and we add them to the roster, I guess, but we don't need the roster, and so I'm going to get rid of that. We're also not going to create a student because we don't need to create a student, right? For this purpose. And I'm just going to paste that code here, and I'm going to clean it up. So the first thing we want to do, select star from students, fine. We don't want to create a student. There's no point in creating a student. We just want to do something with that. Oops. So first things first, I'm going to get rid of all the student stuff. We don't need that, and we don't need that, and we don't need that, and we don't need that, right? These are all the fields of the student, one after the other, and they're going to come from here. Now, a couple things. I'm going to want this ordered by SID, so I'm going to say order by SID. Now, I think I did this wrong. I think order by is literally order by with no space, but that's fine. You'll see the error. That's one of the things. One of the reasons I think we finish early a lot is because I failed to produce the errors. Oops. But we have the string SQL, we have the result set, and then it loops through them. So we're going to go ahead and create the table row. For each student that's returned, we're going to actually create a table row for this student. So we're going to go ahead, and the easy way to do this is to TR. Every time you create a table tag, create the resulting closing tag, right? So obviously you're going to create a table row for the whole thing. So close table row. And the first thing you're going to do is create a table datum for each data item. You're like, wait, what? I'm going to create a table datum for each one. And I'm going to just copy and paste. I'm not doing anything special here, right? Then what? I'm going to cheat because I can. So the first thing I want to do is grab this guy, go like this, and oops, and go and put the close tag in the same thing. There's no reason to actually do what I was doing earlier. Just do it this way. And I'm actually going to copy that because that's going to be simpler. So I'm just going to do that 4 times. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab this and replace this with this. And then I'm going to go replace this with this. Copy and paste can be your friend. Just use it correctly. All right, now we don't need to open and close, blah, blah, blah. We don't need separate ones. What I was going to do is obviously I was going to copy in the for each element, right? Then you're like, okay, still, I don't get what he's doing. I don't understand. You're actually generating the HTML. So watch this. It doesn't matter how many rows you have, 500, 5,000, 3. I should have left that running. It will actually create the HTML for you. In our case, we still have the we go here and we paste it. And it turns out it looks like it did order them by thing. So maybe that's correct. You can actually select all, right click and go format, and it'll actually make it look pretty for you if you like. Yes, I would prefer you did. It takes 2 seconds to do in most editors. It's just click format. But let's see what it looks like. Oh yeah, first of all, I stopped running this server. So oops, oops. Oops, I actually stopped running it. So that's one. The other one is I don't, for whatever reason, have that there. So let's put that there. Yes. There it is. Right now we have a student list, and there's our student list. This is a table, but I want to actually play with it a little bit. So I'm actually going to open it up like this because I want to show you some things that you should almost always set on your table because you're just going to like it better when you do it. So cell padding. So let's start off by setting the border to 1. Okay. And we're going to see the effect of all these things as we go along. So that puts border. Let's go ahead and make cell padding equal to 5. Right. That's the padding inside the cell. Right. So that separates the cell from the wall. And you have cell padding and spacing. If we set cell spacing, sorry, I'm tongue tying on it, you can actually see the difference. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 1. By default, it's 0. So you can see the cell spacing has actually gotten bigger. I can make this bigger so you can see it even more, but this is the space between cells. What I typically do is I make it 5 and I make it 5. Later on, when we do certain things that we do, we're going to want to change these values so that it looks the way we want it to look. I'm also going to make the border disappear. And then I want to show you how to create a table header. We don't need to actually create a table header. You don't actually need to be TH, right? That's a table header. So I'm going to say SID. Oh, excuse me. First things first, it needs to be in a table row, TR. And I'm really annoyed that it keeps adding a comment every 2 seconds. I actually want to get the new line and go like this. That's really all I'm trying to do. It's just it keeps trying to autocomplete for me, and I don't really want to do that. All right, but table header is a table header. So you can see this is name, this is major, and this is GPA. Yes, yes. We clean it up, and you can see table headers, couple things. It automatically centers. I'm going to actually put this to 1 so you can see it again. I'm sorry, I should have left the 1. It actually puts the table headers centered inside the column, and it makes it bold. What a lot of people do is just make this bold, right? because the table header can often be kind of a pain. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this quickly and it's just in my way rather than helping, unfortunately. So I'm just going to change you to D. That did not work. Change you to D, change you to D, change you to D. This way it avoids trying to automatically type for me. I'm going to go ahead and copy you, paste, paste, paste. And I'm going to click here and I'm going to grab you and I'm going to paste, paste, paste. And it'll probably look closer to what you actually wanted if you do that. Watch this, right? You still bolded, but now everything's left aligned just like the other one. You know, you can also specify width, right? So like if you want the width to be the full size of the page, you can do that by using percentages and so forth. I urge you to look at some of those things over here if you want to learn more about how to organize things effectively. It's really, really easy to do that. But I want to show you something else really quickly. I'm sorry. I got I'm getting all over the place. All right. So we have an SID name, major, all those things, right? We have something called HTML elements have something called attributes, and you can specify attributes. So I go to tables. There's some attributes I can set that define things like, I'm trying to think of the name of it. I don't like table headers, by the way. Yeah, so you can define, hey, there you go, attributes, column span, headers. You can specify a bunch of different things for each one of these tags. TR, you can specify background colors and stuff like that. We don't typically do that. In here, you can see the attributes of things. Again, most of what we do is we align using you know, attributes and so forth. I was hoping it would show the attributes, but it really didn't. Oh, it's the global attributes, which are these guys. So you have width, you have this, you have that. Not that interesting. We don't typically do a lot of styling via HTML. We're going to learn that we generally use trying to think of the word. We typically use CSS to do most of our styling. So we want to keep it simple. But you can do quite a bit with width, size, height, all those things if you choose to do so via CSS. Most of that is what we do via CSS. And we'll see that more styling in the next class. Now, I just want to, because this is something you're going to do for your homework, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a new HTML file. And this one, I'm going to call it major, right? We go student list, and inside the body, we're going to go header 1, and then we're going to say student list, and we're going to have major in parentheses. I'll explain why in a second. You can guess why, but right. I'm not loving this fact that it keeps trying to do it for me, and I'm not really loving that. But anyway, I'm going to grab the table border so it's the same, and I'm going to go ahead and paste it. I'm going to go to the end of it, and it should automatically create the bottom of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and create copy and paste. This is going to be how easy this is for your homework too. This should be this easy. So now you have a new index major. Yeah, whatever. So now we're going to order by, excuse me, major, right? And that's that. And we run it. I realize in your homework, you're going to actually be producing a lot more files. You'll have 5,000 records or whatever. It's just a matter of copying more. I'm going to show you one other thing too quickly, if I have time at the end of this. Not now, obviously. To speed that up, you can save it as a text file. Like you can open a file printer and then just print it out to a actual file, if you choose to do so. So now, oops, I need to create a link to it. We're going to have, index page, and I'm going to grab major, take it in there, and say, right, whatever. Yes. And you'll see now we got a student list by major, and here's sorted out by major, right? Couldn't find a major, you're going to get those first, and then you have CS, CSA, IT, and so forth. Sorting it by name is just creating another new mainnet next, but I'm expecting to see each one of those. I'm expecting to see for your homework a file generation for each one of those. So please do that. Just like I just did. I just did SID and major. So if I was going to continue doing this, I would do it for each one of them, right? Obviously, I'm not going to do that now, but I could. The other thing I'm going to do too, just before I finish for the day, is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to put this in the major list, because first of all, we want them to be the same. Oh, come on. There we go. Now I'm going to go wrap that, and I'm going to go index, and I'm going to put it right there. And I'm going to put that right in between there. And then I'm going to copy it and put it in there. And you're like, wait a second, what? Yep. I'm going to do it again for major, because I'm going to put it right by the major thing. It doesn't let me do that. All right. Major here. Copy the whole thing. Put it inside here. Now, come on, go away. There you go. And we get that. And now I can put it in both. Right? Now it's going to be unified. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Also, you want to be consistent. I actually accidentally named that major uppercase. You want to keep everything simple, either uppercase, lowercase, whatever, but be consistent. Now that we have those, we can look at the SID list, and I can look at the major lists, and then go back and forth. And you can even sort by GPA if I choose to do so, name as well. And so forth. And now it looks like I'm sorting it, but it really is just two static pages being served, that were generated separately with a file. That's what you're going to do in homework 3. So it's important that you know how to do that. All right, let's go ahead and talk about forms. It's the last bit. Everything that goes into a form goes into a top level form tag, form, and all form elements will use the input elements. The input elements, the default one, of course, is the text box, but they really have to have name attributes. The name attribute identifies the input received to the receiving application. So when we send the result to whoever's going to deal with the result, they get it from the name, and that's really important. That's how we actually take the form information and use it. So it's very important that you have a name for every single input. So let's look at form elements that are useful. Text fields obviously allows text to be entered. The text area allows a lot of text to be entered. We'll look at some examples of that. Checkboxes allows something to be checked, yes or no. Usually good yes or no questions. Radio buttons allows one thing of a group to be selected. Selection menus, drop-down box, of which one item is selectable, or a box which multiple items are selectable. I have used both of these. I love them. So I almost always make people do selection menus. Submit and reset buttons as well, right? You'll always use the submit button because you need one. The text field is created just using the input tag and the type attribute set to text. Some attributes that you might care about: you can change the default size using size. You can change the max number of acceptable characters. If someone tries to enter more than 60 characters in this particular input type, in this given this tag that you see here, they won't be allowed to, right? It'll prevent them from even putting any more in. You can set a default value, by the way. This is important by specifying value equals, and then that will actually show up when the page loads. Michael will show up in that F name input, the text field. That's really important. We're going to do editing later on, so we're going to want to have defaults. Text area tag allows the user to type in a large amount of text at once. Like for our review website, you're going to have this be the body, right? So if somebody wants to write a long, lengthy review, they can. So the text area has a name, and then it closes the tag, and then it has another tag. And so if you wanted to have a default value, you would put that where the ellipses are. You would put that in between the text area tags. You can set the size of the text area using rows and columns. I promise you're going to want to play with that. That never looks the way you think it's going to look until you actually try it. So it's really important to play with it to get the size of the text box to be what you want it to be. It sounds stupid until you actually do it. So trust me, you're going to want to play with the rows and columns to get it to be the size you want, no matter how you if you use the text area, you're going to want to do that for every form. Allows you to check the box. The input type is checkbox. It has a name, of course. Another important attribute, remember I said our default, right? I'm also talking about each form element, but I'm also talking about it's a way of specifying its default. You specify a checkbox default by specifying checked. If it's that checked attribute isn't there, it's unchecked by default, right? So we want to specify that the checkbox should be checked. We specify checked, and that's this attribute. You see the attribute doesn't actually have any like equals, blah, blah, blah. It's not a name value pair. Like name is a name value pair, name equals, right? This is the attribute. This is the value of that attribute. Checked, if it's checked is there, then it's going to indicate that it's checked. Radio buttons allows only one thing of a group to be selected, and also uses the input tag with the type attribute set to radio. For example, input type radio name equals sex, value is male, input type radio name is sex, value is female. You can assume there are plenty more. Obviously, we want to be inclusive, but I just wanted to be very quick on this. And I didn't put a large number of other things in there. That doesn't mean they couldn't be a more my point is this is not an exhaustive list, but you can also use a checked attribute here to indicate that radio button should be checked. But with the radio buttons, it's only going to allow you specify a group by specifying type radio and then the name. You see the name is the same for both of these, and so these are going to be essentially considered to be in the same group. Be careful if you actually name these all different things. You actually have, instead of a radio group, instead of a group, you have 6 radios, right? So instead of having a radio with 3 dials, you have 3 radios, right? That's not what you wanted. And of course, you can use the checked attribute to denote default selection. I thought I changed this, by the way. I did for the other class, but I did not for this. Selection menu can be used to give users a set of options to select from. So use the select tag with a name attribute, which surrounds a group of option tags. So it looks like this. You have your select, and then you have a close tag here, and of course you have the name in the select. Then you have a set of option values. Now, option, you have 2 things. You have a value. This is what gets passed. If the user selects red, they're going to see red. But if the user selects that, this is what's actually passed. These do not have to be the same thing. We'll see that at some point. I'll do it just so you can see it. But that is what's actually passed. So that's very important to specify the value and the what the user sees. So the red, green, and blue. The user will see a list, and the list is a drop-down list, and the user will see red, green, or blue. But what's actually passed is what's actually in the option value. Addition to that, we want to point out that if you want one of those to be selected, you just identify it as selected. You can also select multiple values by letting the setting the multiple attribute of select. You just set the multiple attribute of select, and now you can specify red and green or red and blue, whatever you particularly prefer. I don't know, right? Submit and reset buttons. In order to process the form as a whole, the user must denote that they are finished by clicking the submit button. This is accomplished using the input tag with the type attribute set to submit. The value attribute sets the text that appears on the button. So in this case, it's going to be the submit. This is now a submit button that's going to show finished. Forget what it says by default. Well, I think it says submit. The reset button resets the form to its original state is accomplished through the input. So remember all of our defaults, it goes back to that state. And the value sets the text which appears on that button, right? So it appears on the button. So forms are required to work. There are two special attributes which control the behavior of the form after the user hits the submit button. This is actually really important. You have a method attribute get and post, and we're going to talk about get and post. Get, remember, it appends a question mark and then name value pairs separated by colon, where post it sends it in the body. We're going to be able to see that now from our own form for the first time. So we're going to keep everything when we're creating these gets. When we're creating the forms, like for your homework 3, that we don't actually need to work, we're just going to use get because it's just going to allow us to see if we're getting what we're expecting to get. The action attribute actually tells the browser where to send the information. This is usually a script where you'll write to handle the form. For example, this was used to be a PHP slide. Form method is post, and action equals my professor.php. In our case, for our homeworks and for the near term, just make it the name of the file that you're using. So if I went in to create a form.html and I put a bunch of form elements, I would set the action to be the name of the form, which in my case is my form.html. Just easier. So I guess I didn't talk about it. I thought I did already talk about it. So how does get actually append the information for each form element? Remember our name value pairs? You're going to get essentially a name value pairs. How does it actually get onto, how does it actually from a get, if you use a get request, how does it actually send the data from the form to the receiver? The full set of the data for the form is appended to the URI specified in the action attribute on the form element. All data is followed by a question mark, name value pairs separated by ampersands. I can show you that very quickly using Google, but I'm not going to, but you could. For instance, google.com. Oh, I already forgot. Right? I search Michael, and you can see question mark, Q equals Michael, and then there's a bunch of other stuff. It tells you what browser is being used and some other stuff. If you actually look into it, it tells you a lot of information, but you could actually have a search that just, if I just copied that part of it, and I got rid of the rest of it. I don't know how to do that quickly. Unfortunately, I was going to say, if you just type that part of the search, it's basically a search, right? So you can do, that's how the get request works. Everything is prepended, is followed by a question mark. So it's URL followed by a question mark. Then the name value pairs come in, and they're separated by ampersands. So and any character is, and a value would make the URI unworkable, is encoded. The name separated from a value using equal sign. So let's see an example here. Because I don't know if we're going to get to, I'm going to use Michael Ruth. You can see Michael Ruth stuff. Oh, there's an obit. Ooh. Oh, somebody in Crestwood apparently died. That's interesting. That's not me. I'm still alive, I assure you. But you can see that there was a space in the search, and you can see it's got a plus and symbol in there. Do not expect that you know what those are. Just know that it encodes spaces, things that make the URI unworkable, that makes the URL unusable. It encodes it. Just know that that happens. The disadvantages, the URL can get very long. It says all fields are sent in plain text, but they all are. The biggest issue is it ends in browser history. So you can bookmark this page and come back to this page whenever you want to, right? Um, and so forth. And so that's a problem, right? You don't want that, especially if it's private data, right? You don't want to support any character. It doesn't support any character sets other than ASCII. That's not that big deal. Also, the form isn't entirely necessary. You saw I just did a query a minute ago for Michael. Um, by just typing in the URL. That totally works. You can do that. That absolutely works. That's a problem because if you have client-side validation, that avoids all of that, right? So they can send whatever they want. Post, the form data is still sent in the body of the HTML request to the server, so it's still plain text. The advantage is it can handle any character set you throw at it, UTF, anything. It's not stored or cached in browser memory by default. It's an uncomplicated URI. The disadvantage, of course, is it's out of sight, out of mind, and is really no more secure than GET. The big difference from a security point of view is it doesn't end in browser history. So you can't just recreate the query constantly because it's in the browser history, which is pretty terrible. The action attribute is generally set to receiver, either a JSP page, a servlet, blank page, what have you. Just use the URL. Just use the page that you're on. We'll see an example of that in a minute. I'm actually gotta stop the recording because I have an appointment. And then I'll come back to do the final form example. We discussed the purpose and use of HTML forms, both basic tags and element. We talked about all the basic elements and their implementation. We discussed getting the form to work. We explained the various methods available. Those are the HTML methods. We also talked about tables. We talked about HTML. I get it. We didn't talk about HTML in depth. We're not going to, right? We are, in fact, a college classroom with computer scientists in the room. HTML is something you can, in fact, learn on your own. I just covered the three-ish things that I feel like you really need to know. Tables, forms, and links as a mechanism to get you prepared for the things that you need in this course. All right, I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm going to do a quick demo of forms in just a minute. If you have any questions, though, please make sure to ask. I'll make sure to say the same when we do the forms. Thank you.